Hi there, this is Frits Rinker. I'm talking about AI applications to finalize the first video I made about it. I talked about the first and the second quadrant, and that video is linked in this message below. Uh, Today I will talk, or this video I will talk about the third and the fourth quadrant. The third is about science, analysis, innovation, invention using AI. Of course, machine learning has been used for a long time in science, and the whole, let's say, basically, if you know about the strand-based, like these walking plastic things that walk on the beach here in The Hague, they were designed by a guy that used genetic algorithms to find out how to, let's say, optimally dimension the legs so that they will walk, have this walking effect. And that's about permutation. So basically, the whole problem with science, or a part of science, is permuting situations and then trying to see if that yields the desired result or an interesting result. The pharmaceutical industry does the same thing. They have just thousands of mixes of different chemicals, and then they try to test each of them for their effectiveness. And neural networks, or the brain, the human brain, is able to do a lot of permutations because it's super sensitive. It's more sensitive than large language models at the moment, way more, and it's also very cheap. Another way to approach that, so the whole permutation challenge is a hard problem in mathematics. It starts with the traveling salesman problem, where you try to find out, let's say, in what order a traveling salesman should travel by a number of cities in a country to have the shortest route. And if you try to calculate that, then of course with one is easy, two is easy, three and four is easy. But soon enough, you find that the number of permutations that he can travel, the number of ways that he can travel by that route, is enormous, and you only know the final distance that he needs to travel once you have done it. So you only know the result if you actually do it. That's a big difference with other problems, and these are called NP-complete, and people try to solve them mathematics. And the way, so there are two approaches that you can, like the brain does a lot of it because it is super sensitive and it can hallucinate with a lot of different permutations at the same time and then resolve to one of them. Large language models do a little bit of it, but not nearly as much. But that's where the analysis and the rationality in the large language models comes from being able to permutate possible fits to your challenge. So you have just the query and answer model in the transformers. So the question is, what is what key fits the query, and how do you permute in the system efficiently to match the query so that you produce the right answer. In science, that is a big challenge, or very interesting to test a lot of options, and then because usually you don't know if there's any law or any rule-based system governing whatever you are trying to investigate. And sometimes, so with the traveling salesman problem, you actually know that there's no way to find the answer unless you can actually do a lot of permutations in parallel. And this is also why you have quantum computing systems, because it is believed that these can do a lot of permutations in parallel. So that's one aspect where AI will be interesting if you manage to devise hardware that can do that more efficiently. And I don't think that the current paradigm is capable. It is only capable in the training hardware environment, and then it's very energy intensive. I don't think it's there yet. The other part, of course, in science is just modeling processes that we don't understand, because neural networks are able to do it because they basically find the latent space and the latent intermediate steps between an input and an output by correlating them internally. And humans never understood what's going on. but that's not a problem because we can still use the effect of it, and when it's finally has learned the correlation, then it can tell us what kind of properties a protein will have, or what kind of, like the protein folding algorithm. That's of course a huge improvement over what we have today if you use neural networks and training data for that. There's really I guess a lack of a lot of training data, plus a lot of training data is insufficient. And I'm really not talking about robots in this image, so I won't. I'll do that in another video. What I think about that. I used to study AI, but it was in the 90s. But then I did visit MIT, and I read everything about the brain that was known at the time until 2001. So I spent a lot of years doing it. And I have my ideas about it, and I already said in the past video, in the last video, that I think that we will be stuck with large language models for a while because they're very energy intensive. But science will really, and of course, science can create theories, large language models can certainly create theories because they can hallucinate. So basically what they do when they hallucinate is that they basically permutate some of the input and let's say choose a different type of response than they would optimally choose. And then it depends on the network how many responses it has to choose from. But then it gets an output, or generates an output that it can of course itself look at and say, okay, do I know this? So basically that's actually the same way humans do it. We dream up something, okay, this is an idea, that's a hallucination. And then our awake brain, our very strict brain goes like, oh, I never thought about that. That's new. And there's a system, of course, in the hippocampus of our brain that helps us grab onto new things so that we can integrate them in our neural systems. And it holds on to new things for a while, and that's a rewarding system. That's why we are so driven to learning about new things. I think a large language model, if it's big enough, can certainly do that. So then it can hallucinate different inventions, different solutions, different, let's say, whatever we ask it for. It can, riff on that. So let's say put it together in. We already seen that the generative AI can, if you say, show me a bicycle made out of flowers, it has no problem doing that at all. And then, so that's a pure hallucination of a generative AI model. Then it can look at that flower bicycle and think, okay, what would it actually take to make this flower bicycle? And then it might find, okay, this is a useless invention, or it's pretty funny if I make it, or etc. And there might be a market for it. Can do all those things. And I guess this was what Sam Altman and those are with the hardware to actually train large language models at the moment can understand, is that okay, this is going to give us a lot of possible options that we have not thought about. It can also tell us exactly how to get there and what it will bring us, because those are all very predictable processes of analysis and producing results that have been trained in these models, or that can be trained in these models. So, but I wrote a blog post about. So that's, like say, the science is about that. It's about permutations. It's about trying things. It's about imagining things and then testing it. And large language models certainly can do that, and IA will help us a lot as long as we use it to that purpose. So it can certainly also invent things. I think that's really to be expected, and I guess we'll be almost overrun by smart alternatives that we have not thought about. And the biggest problem with inventing at the moment in the world is banks. And I come back to the same theme because I've tracked about I guess, 15 very useful inventions. So from desalination to wind energy to solar energy to I say all these different kite energy, all these all these inventions had one weakness, and that was that they reduced the cash flow in the banking system. So they reduced the power of the banks, and so the banks turned against them and hid them, over invested them, put them in remote places. So you can find a desert greenhouse in Australia where nobody ever goes to look. And there was one on, I think, one of these islands, Corsica or somebody, in the 80s. So basically, on this dry, barren island where nothing grew, a guy built a greenhouse which desalinated seawater and also allowed plants to grow and them to produce food. And that guy was bankrupted. But you never hear about it. It's not a solution that you hear about. That is not, let's say, a reason to invest billions. And it uses a lot of glass, of course, but solar panels also use a lot of glass, which is also a thing banks have introduced. They don't need the glass front panel. They don't need it. It can be plastic, but banks insisted on glass, etc. Banks have hidden so many inventions that even so, if the AI now comes out and says, hey man, we can just very cheaply desalinate water by freezing it and then refreezing it, and then the salt goes out of the water. That's very simple. That invention will either be hidden or it won't. It will pop up every time again, and that will be a big reason for banks to oppose and say that AI inventions and AI innovations are dangerous, and that it might lead to a lot of problems. And it's let's say all the usual let's say accusations of terrorism and pedophilia and so will all be lobbed against anybody that uses AI to invent stuff that the banks don't like. It's really very tragic, I think, because it's the whole reason we have climate change is because banks don't like solar panels, because without banks and Shell, solar panels would have been growing to a large volume in production in the 70s. Imagine that is 50 years ago. But I'll be very short about it because this is a long video again, but Shell bought all the factories for the silicon, for the solar panels. It bought all the solar panels. It bought all the patents, and it buried it for like the duration of the patents, which is 17 years. So then you're in 85 or 89 or something like that. That's when solar panels re-entered the market because Shell owned everything. And that's just, there's so many examples. So invention is cool, and AI invention is also cool. But we need to be, and that's my theme, is robo-economic about it. We have to acknowledge that the banks have a serious interest to suppress everything that has low cash flow, and you don't get to make your invention even if they invent, or if the banks do invest, because that desert greenhouse was first invented in the 80s, then reinvented in the 2000s, and then it was invested in and put in a remote place. So, or it put in an LLC, like a desalination technology that is very cheap and low energy, is part of a limited liability company in the US or Canada, because banks invested in it. So then you're very happy as an investor or as an inventor. But of course you grow old as an inventor, like decades pass, and banks have their way with your invention and nobody hears about it again. It's very tragic. Anyway, but the fourth quadrant I think is the most interesting for the world on the short term, is instruction, education and assistance. And I wrote a piece about it which I called BioBots, which is sounds a little bit dystopian. But it is about the fact that if you want to use AI, you can use, like in the real world, like not in a box and not to make you dream through a screen, because the screen's already there. That's all very easy. But if you want to do it through a robot, you have to make the robot. And if you want to make the robot, then of course that takes resources and that takes energy, and that's a lot of work. And in order to build all those things, these new products or half products, You need factories. You have to build the factories. That takes a lot of time. So it's gonna be like 4 years or 5 years before there's any robot at a reasonable price, let's say $50,000 or something like that or less, available that can do useful work, that can actually, let's say, do what Elon Musk talks about or Sam Altman. Like on the short term, they can work for Tesla, for instance, or for Amazon, etc. But I think that, like say, the scaling takes time. It always takes time. So in the short term, it's way more interesting to instruct people and to educate them and to assist them in what they're doing. And so, like a good example of that is what I saw in Vietnam. I'll talk about Vietnam in the next video, a little adventure I had there with the seaweed farming. But so there's these farmers. They farm shrimp and seaweed and all that, like in the what is called that the mangroves. And then they don't know. But of course, banks want more cash flow, so they're trying to sell stuff to the farmers. They try to sell pesticides, and what they do is they drive around with trucks with amplifiers every month, and then they tell the farmers to apply the pesticides or the herbicides or whatever they do, because the farmer has no idea. These are like very simple people, farming people in the mangroves, and all they have to do, let's say, if the world didn't change around them, all they have to do is like fish every day, and then there's a farmer that makes rice, and they buy some rice, and they have rice with fish, and they're basically done. So their lives is really simple, really uncomplicated, and so, but there's this economy that wants to introduce all kinds of cash flow generating products in their lives, and maybe improve it a little bit. So they drive around with trucks with amplifiers, and they say, okay, now you have to use the pesticides, and maybe they go to the rice farms, and now you have to use the fertilizer, and now you have to do this. Of course, that's a very basic way to do something that AI can do much better, which is simply call around, call to people, talk to them, interact with them as a chatbot. We talked about it before, like the replacement of call centers is imminent by AI. So this can be done by an AI that is government owned, and you really have to pray that it's not economistic, that AI, that it's really not geared towards maximizing cash flow for banks. That would be a disaster, because it would be calling around and driving people mad. It's akin to advertising, but it is, of course, can be way more geared to the actual situation of a person. So like where we have, in the cities, we have distraction and domination of what we consume and what we are interested in. In the real life, in the production system, where there's a lot of people that you can use better, or let's say more effectively, you can give them information that they can actually use in order to have a better life. So you have to really be robo-economic about it. You have to really think about, okay, no, I'm not trying to increase cash flow. I'm trying to increase wealth. Wealth is different. Wealth is more food, more nature, more fish, like everything clean, healthy air, etc. No climate change or less climate change. All the things that you need in order to thrive. That's what you dream of, what you desire, but that comes out of your own brain. That's wealth, but if you can apply AI there, you can really change the course of nations. In a very cost-effective way, because everybody has a smartphone. You call them up, you say, okay, well, I know that you have a little farm of 2 acres and blah blah. You do this and do that, but I see on the satellite that blah blah blah. There's a weather system coming, and so you better get your corn out or whatever. You better harvest now, or you better say, and people can show whatever is wrong with their land. Through their smartphone to the AI. AI can analyze and come back with instructions, and if they don't understand it, they can just explain it, etc., etc. So it's like when you used to have, I guess, Holland gave agricultural aid to France at some time, because Holland basically invented intensive agriculture, more or less, after a couple of famines in the beginning of the 1900s. And so, but you had these institutes where farmers could go to be educated about farming and by how to do it the way the Dutch people do it, because the Dutch have a lot of food and the French didn't. This is the same thing, but now it only needs AI hardware and mobile phone network. That's basically the only thing it needs, and everybody has that. So that's a big, I think, way more impactful aspect of AI. Once, if it's applied in the right way, so basically you can say that the economy wants the AI resources to be applied in the first two quadrants, and the robo economy, or the people that want to improve wealth, want to put the weight of the application of AI in the third and the fourth quadrant. And I really think that in this paradigm, let's say in the fourth quadrant, you can really get a lot of use out of Starlink. And so if Tesla would have an AI specifically trained on instructing people in remote areas to make the best choices, talk to them and educate them, then and of course also provide them with feedback on whatever question they had, or maybe a picture, and then integrate satellite imagery in it and then supply that to the remote areas. That would be a big benefit to humans, and then the humans could do the work. You don't need robots for that. And that's of course the same in cities and everywhere else. So, but that will, I think, bring a change faster than let's say a robot revolution, which is interesting, but it just will be way too slow. And if people are smart enough to mobilize the fourth quadrant for themselves and their countries, then they can front run it. And then of course the robots will come in the end. They will arrive and they will do lots of things that people don't want to do, and they will entertain them, and well, people in cities will maybe have some social life with them, all that stuff, all that craziness. But as I said in the last video, people that live in cities are living in a dead-end street, because in the end they use energy and resources, but for what purpose? What do they offer in return? So why would they be there? Why would they receive all those benefits? There's no need for them, so they will be chucked out of the cities eventually. Anyway, this is the second part of a two-part series about AI applications, and I hope you enjoy it. And of course you can become a patron. There's not much in the Patreon part of the Patreon website. I'll put stuff in it, and I have like 3 or 4 crazy projects that I'm working on that I'll be talking about, but the next video will be about seaweed in Vietnam. Thanks for listening.